the promise of real estate investing? You've probably seen the ads and can imagine it now. Long, lazy days on a beach in the Caribbean, snorkeling today, reading your favorite book again tomorrow. All possible with real estate properties that pay you tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars for doing nothing. Meanwhile, there's the reality of real estate ownership, which is phone calls with property managers, printing, filling out, scanning and mailing documents back to the bank and your legal team, entering expenses into spreadsheets and accounting software, overseeing or potentially doing renovations, negotiating insurance, and managing a team. I know, I sound like a real giant Debbie Downer. But while I am an eternal optimist and always will be, I also believe in reality, in knowing it and making aligned decisions, knowing the truth. The truth here? The truth is that not all real estate investing is passive. In fact, a lot of it isn't, especially when we're talking about ownership. Today, I'm joined by my husband and business partner, Troy Michaud, to talk about the realities of real estate investing. Before we go too far, I've got to read this official disclaimer here, so just bear with me. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an offer to buy or sell any securities or to make and consider any investment or course of action for more information. What you hear today is not financial advice. We're not licensed financial advisors, lawyers, mortgage brokers, or real estate professionals. This is not a substitute for professional legal, real estate, or financial advice. And in a platform like this, where we speak to many individuals, each with your own journey and circumstances, it's very important to get personalized advice. I encourage you to build a trusted team of professionals and consult with them to help support you in your personal situation and your individual goals. All right, that's out of the way, so let's get into the meat of this episode. Today, you're going to learn about the myth of passive real estate investing ownership. You're going to learn about our real estate investing strategy and why it's not passive and why we do it anyways. You're going to hear about what our day-to-day and week-to-week workload looks like as real estate investors. You're going to hear what are some of the things that we do to keep our investing as passive as possible, and what are the pieces of work that we are still doing to this day, even though we still have jobs and families and all those things. You're also going to hear a couple of principles and tips to keep in mind as you build your portfolio that will help you to keep it successful and as passive as possible. All right, my friend, listen in. Here's the real talk of real estate investing as we bust that myth of passive and tell you the good, the bad, and mostly just the truth.
Welcome to the Goalden Girls podcast, where we believe you can have it all. I'm your host, Lisa Michaud, and I'm spilling tangible tips, goal-getting strategies, and real-life stories to inspire you to tackle your biggest dreams. You're a woman who knows you're made for more. Get ready to leave the excuses and self-doubt behind by being vulnerable, sharing your truth, and having honest conversations so you can succeed on your terms. Together, we'll set goals you'll actually achieve by staying motivated, having fun, and building a community of women empowering women. It's time to tap into your best self, get confident, and truly have it all. Goalden Girl, let's dive in.
Hello, Goalden Girls, and welcome to another episode about real estate. By popular demand, I've brought back my husband, Troy Michaud. Troy, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I am feeling a little bit sick, as you can probably hear. My nose is still stuffed up, and I'm still coughing, so I'm going to do my best to get through this. And honestly, I'm just going to ask you some questions because you're not sick, so you could do a little more talking today.
All right.
So we wanted to do this episode for a couple of reasons. We've obviously been doing real estate for 12 years now and have a lot of conversations with people, especially lately in our courses and our networking events. And we see a lot of people have been sold this dream of passive income through real estate. And we see a lot of people that have invested money in real estate courses, and then they find out it's a lot of work, a lot of time, and it's not necessarily what they had in mind for a, quote, passive investment, or that they maybe don't even have time for it because they're entrepreneurs, or they have young kids, or demanding jobs, or flat out they just want to travel and want something more passive. And so, you and I, we've talked to people that start to grow their portfolio and then they get really overwhelmed with the work and end up having to, either fire sale properties at reduced prices or just end up kind of stuck. So that's why we really wanted to have this real talk about how much work it actually is to be an investor in real estate. And we're talking about our business model, which is 100% ownership, long-term holds in real estate, at least right now. And obviously there's lots of strategies out there. Today we're talking about ownership and specifically the BRRRR strategy, which is what we do. I think you'll agree with me, Troy, that real estate investing is very much a spectrum. You can be really hands-off, for example, investing in like our real estate income trust or REIT, or as we talked about on episode 71 with Marinella, you could be a private lender. Or you could be super, super hands-on, which is, ownership all the way down to doing your own renovations and doing your own flips, and even hosting and managing your Airbnb all by yourself. But we're kind of somewhere maybe in the middle of that, and we do the BRRRR strategy. So can you give a little bit of an overview of our business and the BRRRR strategy?
Sure. So as you mentioned, we use the BRRRR strategy, which is buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and repeat. So essentially look for underutilized or not maximized properties in terms of rents and perhaps maintenance as well. So find these properties that are a little distressed, turn them around, sometimes over a shorter period of time, sometimes longer, maybe a year or two, and then get them rented at market rates, get the tenant profile cleaned up sometimes, and then take it to the bank and refinance it so that we can repeat, do it again on another building.
So why is that not passive?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to do in there. Buying, well, I guess maybe even start with finding these properties. So you'll have to look on market and off market for properties. It's not just as simple as popping into realtor.ca or realtor.com and saying, I want a distressed property, multifamily in this neighborhood for this amount. I mean, it does take some networking and research and, knowing different streets and different areas and what to look for. So a lot of work just in sourcing it. And then once you actually get it under contract, the work really just begins, where you have to get your insurance, your financing lined up, whether it's conventional, and a lot of times, a lot of these buildings are not conventionally financed. So you're looking at private lenders or different strategies to be able to close it, fund it. And then again, the work really begins once you take possession of it, because now you have a building, perhaps it's vacant, perhaps you just have some bad tenants. There's probably deferred maintenance. There's lots to consider. So again, the work begins, and then you're funding the renovations rather on it, holding it until such time as you can refinance it and get it appraised, change up your insurance, because now maybe you have occupied versus a non-occupied building. There's just so many things that happen along the way that I'm rattling all this stuff off, and I'm missing stuff, and I'm certainly not going into depth about what needs to be done, but there's a lot of management along the way to make this eventually, hopefully, a passive income property. However, we still have sort of stabilized properties that have reached the final R of the BRRRR, but every year you still need to renew your insurance, and there can be huge rate hikes on insurance policies year to year, even with very little change in your coverage. And we've, for example, we're doing this right now on one of our properties. We've been with an insurance company for 7 years, I think, with them. And we just got a quote that was probably 40% less for better coverage with a different company. Now, that's taken days, I would say, of back and forth with insurance brokers, getting all the stuff you need from your existing insurer, who doesn't necessarily like to give it up because they sense that something is coming, that they're about to miss out on your business, so they're less than cooperative. And anyway, yeah, so it's I don't know that it ever truly becomes completely passive unless you're willing to, pay more for someone to completely manage it for you, or to just kind of forego some of those savings, whether it be in insurance or utilities is another one, management of the building, where maybe you're installing low flow water devices to to offset or reduce rather your utility expenses. Like, there can always be something that needs to happen, and maybe you'll have one property that's quiet for a couple of years and then something else comes up, right? So I think there's, in this business model, it's certainly not passive even when it is.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a little bit about, and I want to expand a bit on some of the misconceptions that we hear, because if you look at like ads or listen to certain podcasts or look at influencers, like real estate influencers, I mean, there's a lot of it about how passive it is, but I think a lot of it is kind of misconceptions. Like, you were just talking to someone the other day on the phone who was hoping to buy 4 doors and be able to replace their full like professional salary. And maybe that's possible in some situations, but I wouldn't say it's what we're seeing in the market these days generally.
No, if you can burr a property, you can usually end up with higher cash flow because you've added value to the building. If you're buying turnkey properties, you're probably not getting much, if any, cash flow, I would say, and you're not doing the work, but you're also not really getting the cash flow. So it's tough to replace, like you said, a professional income with a 4-unit building, I guess, unless your income is very, very low.
Or it's huge, like a very like luxury or some sort of, like it would require a huge investment of capital up front.
Yeah, and there is some strategies like I've seen duplex conversions from single-family houses that some people have been able to make good cash flow a month on it. However, you kind of run into like financing limitations, in my experience, where you can only qualify for so many residential loans, and a lot of those models don't really support a commercial loan. So I think there's kind of a finite runway on some of those other strategies unless you start joint venturing or things of that nature.
I just had this feeling like we're sitting here like mama and papa real estate having a hard conversation and being like, look, the reality is like you either need to put in the work or you have to have the capital to make it truly passive, and then you may not be able to make that much income. Like, I almost feel like we're mama and papa trying to give some tough love here.
Well, I think it's just open your eyes to the reality of the situation, and don't be discouraged if you want to invest and it's something that you're really passionate about and something that you enjoy, like I do. But it's still work. I mean, even bookkeeping, right? Like,
I thought you loved that.
No. I think we've even mentioned that on previous episodes that keeping their books straight, and we've tried to outsource it a bit, but there's some limitations with what you can do. And again, unless you're paying for it, right? And we have had a year or two where we spent thousands of dollars on bookkeeping, and I didn't really see the value in it because we still ended up having to speak to a lot of the expenses and change them and enter them, accordingly. So you still have to be a part of it, right? Only you knew what that one strange looking transaction was, or how you borrowed money from a shareholder loan situation into your corporation, things like that, that are, you still have to manually input some of this stuff. So I
guess at our level anyways, we're 64 units now. Is that right?
Thereabouts, yeah.
Like, you haven't bought anything without telling me, have you? Or
I try not to.
Try not to. There might be some offers out there. Obviously, if you get to 640 units, you have to outsource more of this stuff, right? But I do think that that's actually one of the things I did want to touch on is this trade-off, I guess. I think you do have to really understand like that trade-off of like the more work you do, the more money you'll probably be able to keep in your business, and vice versa. The more that you outsource, the less money that you're going to keep. And I think I just want to quickly make one more discernment here, that I think fully passive income doesn't exist anywhere. But what I think real estate allows you to do is generally disconnect trading time for money in a direct sense. But it doesn't mean it's passive. And it's not like an exact number. So there's been some things that we do outsource consistently and have outsourced from the beginning. And there's things like bookkeeping that 12 years later we're still doing. So it's kind of an interesting thing. Like I think about, you and I, when we first started, we kind of joked that we were accidental landlords, but I think one thing we did do right is we were smart about realizing we didn't want to just buy ourselves another job. I feel like now we've maybe almost done that, but
yes,
we have bigger goals though now, different goals. So back then we didn't really know what we were doing, and now, we have ambition. We have some big ambitions and things to do. But yeah, anyways, what I wanted to say about that is that one of the things that we were very intentional from the beginning is we don't want to be property managing. And so every single deal we've ever looked at, we've always had to factor in property management costs. And that means that there's a lot of deals we probably say no to that other people who are self-managing might say yes to. But we did this because we knew that there'd be a ceiling where one day we'd no longer be able to do the management. We'd have to outsource it anyways. So we may as well buy the properties where that's already factored in.
Yeah. And to go back to what you said about economies of scale, like our very first 2 rental units, we did self-manage, right? And then after that, we've said, well, I've had enough of this. Let's let someone else do it. And to your point, yeah, when you get to 10 times the units of what we have now, should we do that, there's no way that either of us would be doing the bookkeeping. You'd have a financial controller, but until then, it's not necessarily cost efficient for us to hire that financial controller. And there's probably other tasks that you can hire out long before you get to that point. So yeah, I guess keep that in mind. If you're buying a duplex, maybe you're managing it, maybe you're not. But probably your bookkeeping, probably you're, dealing with all of the transactions that have to happen around that
insurance
property.
Brokers and financials and all those things. Yeah.
Yep.
So what trade-offs do you see, or what are some of the general principles you think we follow to try and make it slightly more passive, or how we balance those things?
Automation, I think, is a big one. Like, I still talk to people that do their books in our Excel spreadsheet. I just talked to one the other day, and she was not a inexperienced investor by any means, but she was literally doing her books in Excel. And I kind of said, hey, are you interested in a program for this? And she was currently looking at it. But you can set up recurring transactions to automatically just kind of be accepted, and it codes them correctly in QuickBooks, or Xero is another one, I think, very similar. Even just like pulling in the information, it'll automatically pull it from your bank accounts. You can have them linked right into the program, and it saves time because, maybe 1 or 2 clicks, you can process a transaction. And if you do it frequently enough, Lisa, that it's easy to remember what the transaction was for. So if you did it on a monthly basis, you might only have to spend an hour or maybe less kind of doing it, depending on how many transactions you have, of course.
I feel like you secretly love bookkeeping, and I don't know if anybody picked up on that dig there, that I definitely do not do bookkeeping on a regular basis. Point taken, my dear, point taken. I gotcha. Yeah, QuickBooks, it is a game changer. I think we also have an affiliate code for some sort of a discount. So I'll drop that in the show notes as well, because QuickBooks, we started with like 1 account. Now I think we've got 3 for all the different companies.
Yes.
Excuse me, but it does, I think, make a big difference and does help. Yeah. I think also, in terms of, that's pretty specific, but I think like zooming out a little bit in terms of like a principle, I think, we've talked about this, your profitability declines as your passivity increases.
Yep.
Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, like property management, is that what you're referring to?
Just generally, like the more work you do, or the less work you do,
yeah,
the less money you make.
Definitely. I mean, property management was one we offloaded early, and that's a huge part of it, I think. Sourcing tenants, doing background checks, even just knowing tenants, good property managers who have been doing it a while just know that, oh yeah, I've had that tenant before and I will not rent to them ever again, because of disturbances or damage or whatever. But, if you don't have to do that, if you can pay someone to do it for you, you don't get a call that a toilet needed to be snaked. You don't get a call which it's funny because you talk to some people and they're like, I've never heard of a tenant calling with a toilet plugging. And I'll get a statement, say that represents 25 doors for a month. And I might have like 2 or 3 call outs, some of them even like after hours calls for, snaking a toilet. So it is a real thing, people. but yeah, so we've outsourced that task, and it really unlocks a lot of time for you that you're not trying to call the plumber, trying to call the gas fitter, trying to call an electrician or even just a handyman or a carpenter to fix little things. If you have a property manager that has a team on staff, and not necessarily all trades, like, you don't necessarily need a plumber or an electrician to be a part of the property management staff, but if they have a kind of handyman carpenter on staff that can just run over and fix the door, right? Like the main entry door maybe to your building is not latching and it's a security issue, or you're blowing heat outside in the wintertime. Well, they can just rip over there as soon as the tenant calls it in and have a look at it, versus calling you. Then you got to find someone who's capable and willing, and again, there's people that have those handy people on speed dial, and they call them up, and I just get a bill at the end of the month. It's a statement rather that shows, this individual went over and fixed the door and it cost me $28 for his time. So, I think offloading those property management is one of the biggest ones for us. And I can't really think of any other major. Having a VA, I guess, is helpful in many areas of our business, but
okay, here's kind of some different ones, like wholesalers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a way of outsourcing it too, right? Like,
definitely.
Yeah. That means that you spoke about all the things about procuring a deal. That takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's also, we'll have to do a future episode on like being remote landlords and kind of what that looks like. But we cannot, drive up to people and say, hey, do you want to sell this building? Or we don't necessarily have the same local connections as somebody would. The same thing with, if we got calls for toilets, it'd be an expensive flight to go and snake it. So some things are just not practical. But talk about wholesaling. Like how do you see that helping, and how does that all work?
So wholesalers basically go out and find properties, whether they're distressed or not, but find sellers who are looking to sell off market for whatever reason they may have. And then they get it under contract, and then they will assign the contract to you for a fee. So usually there's a wholesale fee there's a wholesale fee that's included on top of the purchase price, and you're essentially paying them for their marketing and their time to source and get these deals.
And we've done that before.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another thing that kind of a different way of outsourcing, making it slightly more, quote, passive. But yeah, I think the vast majority of the deals, you've sourced them, not the other way around. But I guess it's another way you could make it more passive.
Yeah. I think we've only bought one wholesale deal, but.
Yeah, just one, I think, so far, too. Trying to do, I didn't think about that ahead of time to talk about that, but it came up. I'm like, that's such a good example, too. We talk about, so we outsource property management, make bookkeeping simpler. But then we also, it's all balancing, right? Because then we also buy, I don't want to say headache buildings, but we buy buildings that are unstable, buildings that are a lot of work. So I feel like that's a very intentional trade-off that we've made there. We don't do the toilets, we do the whole bathroom. We renovate the whole thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to speak to that a little bit? Like, what does that mean? What does it look like? Why are we buying under-maintained building or buildings with opportunities, and how does that make sense for our business?
Well, we try and force the appreciation of the building. So doing strategic renovations, like you said, managing tenants, getting less desirable tenants out perhaps, and just making the building safer and more desirable for other tenants to live in, right? Like we've kept tenants in a building that we've owned for, almost 3 years now, that are paying significantly under market rents. We could have either evicted them or increased their rents long ago, but they pay their rent on time. They have had some modest increases, but it's still affordable for them to stay there, and their units would have to be renovated once they left. So, for now, we're just keeping them there. But the profile of the entire building has increased significantly. We've evicted, I think, at least one drug dealer from that building. We've just made it more habitable and made it a place where people want to go, and not a place where it was their only option perhaps before. So it's warm, dry, comfortable, freshly renovated, and a nice building now.
You're doing a great job selling them. But it's a lot of, I guess what I wanted to say was that it's a lot of work to get at that point.
Yeah.
We don't buy them in that state. And that's the difference between a turnkey versus what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we've made that strategic decision that we're going to outsource property management. Once in a while, do a wholesale deal where we can outsource some of the buying. But a lot of the work comes in terms of finding the right deal and managing the renovations. And there's a lot that goes into that. Even though you're not physically doing the renovations, a lot of work goes into making sure we know what's going on with it, right?
Yeah, and just getting approvals for the contractors to kind of do the larger chunks of work, making sure that that's kind of staying on track, managing the managers essentially. And that's, how we've probably tripled or quadrupled the I don't want to say price of the building because we haven't sold it, but the value of the building from what we've purchased it from till today, and with a fair bit of renovation, but not definitely not even 1 times the original purchase price. You know what I mean?
Break that down a little bit better.
Well, okay, so like if we bought it for, and we did buy it for $242,000, I think we ended up putting maybe around $130,000 into it. So we're into it for say $370,000. It's probably worth, I would guess, $1.2 million, maybe somewhere in that neighborhood. So that's kind of what we've been able to achieve, I guess, with adding value to some of these buildings. It took a lot of work, and it took a year to kind of get it all turned over and get all the units brushed up. But now it's good.
That was also like the crown jewel. Not every single deal is that.
No, that one wasn't. But I mean, so another one we just did, we bought it when everyone said there was no deals in, kind of this, I think it was October of 2021. We purchased it. It was 3 units, so it's not even like a massive building. We paid $117,000 for it. We put, I think it was around $50,000 into it, and now it's worth, I forget the appraisal. I just got it back recently, but I think it was around $260,000 or $270,000. So, even if we're into it for $167,000, let's call it. So there's $100,000 in kind of forced appreciation right there. So it's still possible, I guess. And it's not like $1 million building either, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we're getting into deal talk, which is I feel like a whole other episode, but it's interesting to hear. And this is, I think, the question that everyone has to determine when they're investing is like, what are obviously goals? First of all, what are you trying to get out of it? And then also balancing, what strategy is going to meet that? And then how much time and capacity do you have, and where are your skills, and where's your interest, and how can you match all of that up? And I feel like Burr's been a good mishmash for us on that.
Well, I guess another part of passive or what have I done to make it more passive and to offload work is, say, that deal I just spoke about where we put 50,000 in renovations in. I haven't added it up, but I would guess we're probably in the $10,000 of that $50,000 was used or was spent for the GC, for the general contractor who oversaw essentially all of the renovations. So I interfaced with them to make sure that work was happening and on track and that sort of thing. But as far as managing which electrician came in when and which plumber came in and which drywaller and painter, no idea. So we paid for that passiveness because at the same time we had probably 4 or 5 other projects on the go in the last year. So
so it's almost sounding like we outsource almost everything, assistant, property manager, general contractor, the actual renovations. But I think that this is kind of where we wanted to have the conversation about that. There can be a misconception that, okay, you're still not doing anything, but that's not the reality. So what is the reality of real estate investing you think that most people don't know?
I would say it's work. That's the biggest one.
Okay, real estate dad.
That it is, right? And it becomes more passive as you kind of get more into it and as the building is stabilized, but definitely it's work.
What does your day-to-day, week-to-week look like? Because it's not just that like you buy it and then money rolls in. You don't just buy a building, insert money here, get money out.
I would say every day, if not every day, every other day that I review new deals coming in. I have multiple sources from either wholesalers or, even just MLS or work with realtors, who find stuff off market, or sometimes you get an advanced preview before it hits the market.
Facebook groups. Yeah. So you're constantly on the prowl looking for deals, and then, underwriting one, or if you have a deal that you're going after, writing the offers, and then all the due diligence steps after that. Once you get an accepted offer, then it's making sure your contractor can run through it, getting your appraisal, getting your inspection, which again kind of goes hand in hand with the contractor going through there, but all your legals, making sure your lawyer can support it, having an alternate if they can't, getting your financing. That's a big hurdle. If you're financing privately, you got to get the capital, get the structure set up with the lender, or if you're doing it through a bank, then, that's also work.
Yeah, they want to know your whole life story. And on some of these commercial deals, it can take me like a full day and a half to provide a complete financial picture of all of our corporations. They always want to see, income and expenses for individual properties held within each corporation, stuff that's held personally. They want to know everything, right? So getting all that together, and of course you could compile all this information and then 3 months later it's outdated or it rolls over to the next year and you got to get everything back together again for another deal. So yeah, I would say it's doing that. And then keeping an eye on the running business. So checking in with property managers usually depends on what's happening, but the stabilized stuff sometimes once a month. The non-stabilized stuff, the stuff that's in the midst of renovations, just probably weekly. I would say I talk to property managers and our people doing construction and make sure that everything's on track. Making sure that they are keeping my timelines in mind. So sometimes there's, they're pulled in other directions, right? They have other jobs they want to do for other customers. So,
but you definitely try and keep us top of mind.
Yeah. I think it's not always just pestering them either. Like sometimes, even like realtors, if I get an appraisal done, my realtor that I work with, I'll always kind of share appraised value with them just so that they can get a better sense of what appraisers looking at in the market, helps them price, things for their clients if they list stuff. And also, if they're putting out offers, they can kind of know what appraisers are thinking and seeing at that point in time. And then it gives you kind of some, good rapport with them, and they're willing to help you out too if you need help evaluating a unit or a building. They're more apt to to help you if you're helping them too, right? And so
we have a list of tasks here, but it doesn't include relationship management, which is super important, and networking. Yes,
networking is a big one, and I try and do that more and more because some of our best deals have come just through our network. Even that's how we've met private lenders. That's how we've met everyone, really. That's integral to our team right now, is usually comes through some sort of referral. So
you also, on top of all of this, have a full-time job.
Yes.
You work like 90 hours a week at your job.
Yes.
For 2 weeks, and then come home. And how much time are you still working on real estate?
So I guess to preface what Lisa just said, I work 2 weeks on, usually it probably averages out to 13 hours a day. So yeah, around 90 hours a week for 2 weeks. And then I'm off for 2 weeks. Usually I would say I work Monday to Friday, 6 to 8 hours a day for my 2 weeks off. I would say like 35 to 40 hours a week.
And I probably do 10 to 20, depending on what's going on, between investors, networking, creating win-wins, repayments. Well, you've been doing some of the repayments, which is great. Legal structures, liability policies, estate planning. Like as I'm reading this out, I'm like, why do we do this? Why are we doing this? And I feel like if I'm thinking this, I'm sure there's somebody else listening to this thinking this sounds really hard and potentially discouraging. So why do you do this? And what is it about real estate that still makes it worth it for you and might maybe undiscourage somebody who's listening?
It's fun for me.
I knew you loved bookkeeping.
Not bookkeeping, but just generally, this summer, for example, she's rolling her eyes at me, but this summer, for example, we were going to take the summer off and not purchase anything, just kind of get through our existing projects that we have on the go.
And enjoy the summer and enjoy life and have a bit of a break.
Yes, that's why. But yes, so what we weren't going to do was purchase anything. And I did buy another, 2 buildings. I was going to say 1, but yes, 2. And
I'm over here flashing the two signal.
I thought it was a peace sign, but and I think that over time, like when you do this enough and you've underwritten enough deals and you kind of get to know what's a good deal. And I actually even tried to talk myself out of buying at least one of them. And
I'm so curious. I feel like I missed out on that conversation.
Well, so when I was underwriting it, I looked at it and said, okay, what if I had to pay 8.5, or I think even maybe I went up to 10% interest rate on this property because, this was in the middle of the Bank of Canada hiking the prime rate.
We're still in the middle of that, I think.
Hopefully we're at the tail end of it, but we were in the midst of 3/4 point and then 3 weeks later, 3/4 point and 0.5 point or whatever it was. So I was like, oh man, what if rates really go up? So I think I put in 8.5 and I looked at it and said, actually still makes sense to buy this. And I was like, but 10, it won't. Okay. No, it makes sense at 10. So I felt like I was obligated to buy it. And then we've worked with our awesome mortgage broker who got us financing for it. So it was kind of quick and painless. So why I do it, I guess, is back to the question is
it's not for a summer vacation.
No, it's, I guess it just becomes almost like a hobby. I don't build model trains. I don't, play volleyball. I don't have a car that I work on in my garage. I don't have, that sort of thing that I do, but I guess I do this. So this is maybe my hobby.
I thought we were doing this so you could one day have a hobby.
Right.
No.
But in the meantime, well, I mean, so like organized sports, for example, anything that I need to be there every Thursday at 7, like best case scenario is I can make half of them, and quite likely with travel and other things I can make fewer, or, you know, vacation, that sort of thing, make fewer than half. So it's hard to commit to something like that. And this I can kind of do from anywhere at any time. And yeah, it makes me feel alive, Lisa.
Wait, should we trust the high of real estate?
There you go. Maybe we trust the high of real estate.
I'll tell you why I'm saying trust the high. So before we record every episode, I always pull a Danielle Laporte Truth Bomb card. Troy, now this is Troy's turn to roll his eyes. But he pulled the card and it said trust the high. And he was like, I don't even know what this means. Like, it'll come up, but there'll be a way that it weaves itself into the conversation. And I feel very validated, and that's exactly it. Like, you enjoy it, and you're having fun with it, and so much so that we couldn't even have a summer vacation.
I mean, I don't know that we didn't. We still were on vacation. We just happened to have to run into town one day to sign some documents. But I would say that's one reason to do it. The other one is like passive income. So as the kind of snowball rolls down the hill, metaphorically speaking, it picks up more snow and it picks up more mass, and it becomes easier to do these things. So this deal, for example, it was almost too easy. I don't want to, sound conceited or anything, but it was just very...
No, this is the part where we're trying not to discourage everybody, so you're good.
It was like mechanics, right? It's like muscle memory. So the more you do things, the more that you do the same task over and over, you kind of look at it and it just becomes, okay, yeah, I just have to do this. I call this guy, I call this person, I get that. That's done. And long ago, I made a closing checklist, for example, and every time that I start compiling all of the, purchase and sale agreement, digital documents into kind of one folder, then I always inevitably pull in this checklist as I'm getting close to closing. And I'm like, oh yeah, I should pull the checklist and make sure that I'm actually have all the stuff done that I need to do. And I just like, oh yeah, done. Okay, great. Nothing really left to do on this list. So I guess that's, again, I don't want to sound conceited, but like that's where I'm at.
It gets easier.
It gets easier
is what I'm hearing. That's the message here, is that you get your systems, you learn a lot along the way. You get best practices, you create systems. We'll have to do an episode 2 in the future about systems, and maybe you can share that closing checklist with everybody too. But I think those are really good points. So like, you're enjoying it, and I think that's a really big part of like just life, like you said. You're having fun, it's good. Trusting the high of real estate. You've got your checklists and systems to make it easier for you. And it does get easier because you've done it. You remember, you've got the connections, you've got those things that already kind of going, which is awesome. I think too, like, you haven't talked about this, but this isn't like, we're not in this for the get rich quick thing. We're looking to build wealth over many years. And I'm not sure about you, but I know I'm hoping to have a little bit more freedom because of it. And it kind of feels like, I was talking to a friend the other day who they both have full-time jobs and they're looking to get into real estate. And she was like, so that eventually her partner can stop doing the shift work that he's doing. And she was like, it's going to get harder before it gets easier. And I felt like when she said that, I was like, oh, we're in the hard. Like, we're in the harder before it gets easier. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a relative term, I guess, hard, but there's sort of like a learning curve, right? Where it's hard at first and then it becomes easier. And then again, it goes back to, it's more work, right? It's not necessarily difficult to do what you do once you understand what you're doing, right? And so I think maybe hard's the wrong term, but for what I'm experiencing, it's more just work.
Okay, it's felt hard for me at times, I think, being the other person and picking up some of the other things in our life around that. But I think, I don't know, it feels like it's harder now than hopefully it will be in 10 years, I guess, depending on what it looks like. I think it's not for everybody, I do think it's really important to find something that's interesting. You and I have, even before we bought real estate, before we really got into more investing, we've always been interested in it. Whenever we go anywhere, we always look at properties. We just have that genuine appetite for it. But I know some people are interested in stocks, or some people are interested in Amazon shops, and other people are interested in crypto. Like, I think it is important to kind of follow that. So I don't necessarily think that real estate investing is the only strategy or the best strategy or the best investment. But it definitely seems to work for us. And I think even though there is a learning curve, even though it is work, even though it can be really scary sometimes, and all of those things, I think it's really great for us to build freedom down the road. I want to ask you a question on cash flow. Because I know we target kind of that like 100 to 200 per door-ish. That's, I'm going to call it like relatively hands-off once that's stabilized.
Yep.
Do you have any sense of what that number would be if you were more hands-on, or like what that range might, like what if we also had a financial controller, like what would that look like, you know?
I don't know, if your hands... And I don't really ever look at it, but I think what you can do is expect 10% of your gross rents to be going to property management. So if your rents are $2,000 a month, well, then that's another $200 a month that you would either spend to property management or keep if you're doing it yourself. And, but if your building generates $10,000 a month, well, then that's $1,000 a month. That's yours versus the property manager's. So it's up to your rent roll, I guess, and how many doors you have. And that would be my general expectation, I guess.
Cool. So what's the least glamorous part, do you think, of real estate investing?
I don't know if it's glamorous. Like I'm trying to think of what is really glamorous about. That's
my second question.
Oh.
The first one is, what's the least glamorous?
Well, I'm just trying to say, like, put it into perspective. I mean, it's work, number one. I don't know how many times I'll say that, but someone go back and write it.
Searchy, we'll just put the work in and he'll tell us.
There you go.
Drop it in the show notes.
I think eventually it probably will be glamorous. Maybe not even glamorous. I'll call it glorious, where we won't be doing a lot, because the stabilized properties take a lot less work each month, right? You're not necessarily concerned about renovations that are happening or, sourcing more deals if you're in sustainment mode versus acquisition mode. You're not looking for them. You're not analyzing them. You can just shut that part out.
Yeah, there's a big difference. For example, I'm thinking renovations on like our stabilized sixplex. If like our tenant moves out and we do some renovations, we think a lot less about that versus the fire rebuild, where all 6 units are vacant, and it's been almost 2 years now, and like we're relatively focused on that and following up on that, because all 6 units, there's no income coming in on that property, so it's got a different urgency to it, and
yes.
different work and focus required on it.
Yeah.
How much time, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, so it doesn't have to be a perfect answer, but I'm just curious, how much time percentage-wise would you say you spend on stabilized properties versus unstabilized properties, the ones that are still in the BRRRR, the first couple stages of BRRRR?
Like 10 to 1.
10 to 1. Okay. And then let's also now just take this, because I just seem to love math today. How many of our properties are stabilized versus not stabilized? Let's do some quick math here.
I would say we're probably... say 4. Wait, 1, 2. I don't know. There's a bit of it depends on what you consider in the midst of a BRRRR, right? Like there's some that are much more extensive work required, and then there's some that the rents are just low and we're just waiting for the opportunity to increase rents. There might be, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 worth of, flooring we got to put down and paint it out. But so it's not really that substantial of a renovation. So like we have,
I feel like, okay, so there's only like 3 categories. There's like stabilized, and then there's like the ones that really are time sucks, that are like deep in like the renovations, and there's some urgency, and then there's the ones that are sort of in waiting. Would you say there's a spectrum there?
Yeah. I'd have to
You
look
don't
at
have to like perfect it. Okay, I'm just
I don't know,
say, like,
probably
a rough number like 30%, 30%, 30%.
Yeah, I'd say we're over half are probably
Stabilized?
stabilized.
So
Or
6 or 7 are
close to,
stable-ish?
yeah.
Okay, so 6-ish are... Okay, so half the portfolio takes up 90% of the time.
Yeah.
Just like, I think that's an interesting... I don't think we've ever kind of reflected on that or thought about that, but that gives a little bit of an understanding as well in terms of like what you're getting into. Right? Would you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So people who are listening to this can take some comfort in knowing that. And I think that's what I mean about when I say, like, I feel like we're in the hard. Like, 90% of the time is that stabilization.
But I think we're also planning to also have a couple, 3, 4 projects on the go at all times for the foreseeable future, right? And
totally. But foreseeable future doesn't mean forever and ever, right?
No. But then you get to the point where we
are going to... Hold on. I feel like I need to get some sort of a commitment from you that there's going to be some sort of a break one point.
Yes, but then you still have like the existing properties that have,
totally
crept up on you that you still have to
1
maintain,
hour
right?
compared to 9 is, I guess, the point.
Yeah.
And that's where we're trying to get to.
Yes.
Would you say that's you said glorious part of it? Is that like looking ahead to that future?
Yeah, that's I think what we're all striving for. However, it's to get there is not. And I guess if you're sitting on a whack of money and you want to just put 25% down on a bunch of kind of stabilized properties and just buy them, even the acquisition part and the sourcing of them, is probably a little bit easier. But you're not necessarily then getting any cash flow if some, maybe, I don't know.
So what you're saying is that Ferraris and timeless vacations don't come without a lot of work and probably years of it.
And if you have all that money, just go buy your Ferrari now. You don't need to buy a bunch of properties.
So true. So true. It makes me think of the old parable. There's a story of like a businessman that goes on vacation and he sees a fisherman on the beach every day, and he says to the guy, like, "Oh, it's so amazing! Like, look at you. You're here every day, and you're fishing in the morning, and then he's off at like 3:00, and he's barbecuing his fish on the beach, and he's having lunch or dinner with his wife on the beach and enjoying the sunset." And the guy's like, "Oh man, like that's so nice! Like, what a lovely life!" And but he goes up to the fisherman and he's like, "Oh, you could. Why don't you buy 3 boats? And why don't you could hire people for all your boats?" And the fisherman's kind of like, "Yeah, like then what would I do?" And he's like, "Well, then you could maybe open up a different location." The fisherman's like, "Okay, well, like then what?" And the businessman is like, "Okay, well then you could also package these for sale and you could sell them around the world and you can make even more money." And the fisherman is like, "Well, then what?" And he's like, "Well, then you could be on your boat all day and fish, and you could have sunset on the beach and cook your fish and have dinner with your wife every night." And the whole point of the story is, if you could already just live your dream life now, why would you put in all that work to buy yourself the freedom later?
Yeah. Buy your Ferrari now, I think, is what you're telling me.
I more meant you have 2 weeks off now. Well, I mean, yeah, devil's advocate there. Like, why don't you just take your 2 weeks now and have that freedom?
I think it goes back to like how hard is your job for what you're compensated for, right? Similar to this, like when I was supposed to be on vacation and bought a property because it's easy enough to do. It's just work, and I think my job, I've sort of reached a point in my career where I enjoy what I do. I like working with the people that I work with, and I make good money at it, and it's I don't know, it's just work, right? So. And it's challenging and it's different every day, or can be different every day. And I don't know what I would be doing if I was not doing that job. Like probably real estate, but
like you're definitely your real estate hobby for sure.
For sure. But I don't know if my real estate hobby quite pays me as well just yet. But I guess that's the goal. Then I can have 2 weeks on at real estate and 2 weeks off at home.
You kill me, honey. You kill me. Okay, other devil's advocate question. Why don't you just buy the Ferrari now?
I think that maintaining a Ferrari is quite expensive. I don't even think it is very expensive. I mean, it's all relative, I guess, how much money you have and how much you want to spend on Ferrari maintenance. But I would say to have it and to maintain it and insure it is quite expensive. And I don't know if I'm to the point where I want that or could afford that.
Okay. So I'm hearing there's not a Ferrari that's going to surprise me.
No. Maybe one day.
Just buildings.
Maybe one day.
Just buildings for now, hey?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. So before you go, there's so much out there. We get a lot of amazing feedback and questions. And things are shifting a lot right now with interest rates going up and markets changing a lot. And we're obviously still actively investing. What are a couple of things, knowing that things are, I feel like how many times can we say uncertain and unpredictable but they really are. And also knowing everything we've just talked about here in terms of like why we still love investing, the fact that it still works. What are 3 tips that you think are really important to keep in mind for anyone who wants to be successful in real estate right now and moving forward?
I would say know how to underwrite a deal.
What does that mean?
Make sure that you understand the income and expenses associated with the property.
So how to analyze it.
And make sure you're including maintenance, management, and vacancy, because even if you're not considering these, your financing institution likely will. Interest rates, I think that's one that needs to be considered very deeply. I don't know where interest rates are going to go. I'm not an economist by any means. So make sure you're stress testing yourself, right? I think that for residential rates, the mortgage broker or the lender will do that for you. I think they add a couple % to whatever today's rate is and make sure you can still afford that, so that in 5 years when you go to renew that you're not, unable to afford your payments. But I don't know that commercial lenders do that for you. So, when we are looking out, 2-3 years into the future, even, before all of these rate hikes, I want to say I was underwriting at like 5.5 or 6% for a future refinance. So to give you perspective today, I think we're at about 6.5 to 7% for commercial rates. And on top of that, rents have gone up quite a bit. So I think it's conservatively underwriting your deal and factoring in maintenance, management, vacancy, and potential higher interest rates.
So that's like several extra percentages, seeing if the deal still makes sense at that.
Yeah, like I said, the one we bought in August, I think I pushed it up to 10 because I was looking for a reason not to buy this.
I almost feel like you're almost literally doubling the interest rate, because back then it would have been around 5.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, you're at least doubling it to see what it'll do.
Yeah, I don't know if you need to double it. That's pretty extreme. I think, like I said, I was just kind of looking for a reason not to buy it. But yeah, I would say a couple points for sure, if not more.
Property taxes.
Property taxes, that's a big one. I think people overlook where if you purchase a property that has a very low assessment on it, and let's say you're buying a property for $500,000, we'll say, and it's currently assessed at like $200,000. I mean, you can add a 0 to both of those to play with whatever scale you want to play with. But for easy numbers, let's use that. Consider that the taxing authority that you're buying in is likely going to reassess your property once a sale has happened that has such a disparity between the assessed value and the actual market value. So you'll probably see a property tax rate hike, and it could be significant. Yeah, and I've seen a lot of investors. Actually, we invested in New Brunswick, as most of you probably know. And at October, I think 3rd, yesterday was they released all the assessment values for 2023, not the actual tax values, but the actual building assessment values. And I think people are collectively losing their minds because some of them have gone up substantially, considering they purchased a building, like exactly what I just described, right? Purchased a building for a lot more than it was assessed at, and it was reassessed at $450,000. And
your taxes go from $5,000 to $9,000.
Yeah.
Or again, add some zeros on there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. Okay, so that's number one. Make sure you're underwriting your deals. I feel like all inclusively, you're analyzing all these pieces. Number two, what else would you say to be successful? To really keep in mind to be successful right now.
Building systems. I think we talked a little bit about what we do, and some of that is programs, and then some of that is, we'll call them procedures or checklists, so that you don't have to think about it and you don't forget about it. I also like using Asana, which kind of all the running tasks, I can just set the due dates out in the future, and then that prompts me to check up on things, a week or a month or whenever I need to. Same with, insurance renewals that are a year out that you might want to consider getting another quote. So you can set that for 10 or 11 months in advance, things like that, that it takes kind of the mental day-to-day of trying to remember everything off of you. And then you can just work with whatever is actually assigned to you at that time. So I think that's helpful.
And QuickBooks.
Yeah.
You love it. Okay, we'll do another episode, I think, all about systems, and maybe share some of your checklists. What's the third thing you would say?
Work. This is prepare for some work, right? Like roll up your sleeves. It's not that hard. I don't know. I maybe shouldn't say that. Initially it might be hard, and there's a big learning curve, but you can pay for mentorship programs to gain that experience, or that knowledge rather, and then you get the experience kind of as you do it. So prepare to work.
What do you feel like you've given up? Do you feel like you've given up anything? Because you don't do sports. You're not taking summers off. You're hardly even getting your days off. So do you feel like you're sacrificing?
Not really. I think that I've never done organized sports after childhood, I guess. My adult life, I've been working shift work. So I've never really experienced that, and that I miss it.
Okay, maybe not organized sports, but there's other things you probably could be doing, fun that you could be having, or beach days, or lounging, or Netflix shows to catch up on, hanging out with friends. Do you feel like you're missing out on those things?
We still go to the beach. We got a 4-year-old, so we go to the beach as much as we can to entertain her. But yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. I can still take off whatever time I want, right? I can choose to, in the summer we did, I know that you say we didn't, but we did, we'll call it disconnect a bit from real estate, and I wasn't working that much, and I did take time off. And sometimes when I'm home for 2 weeks, I'll only work from maybe 9 till 11 or 9 till noon every day, or not at all if I want to go do something. So I think it becomes flexible in when you want to work. And I would say I usually try and load myself up more so in the wintertime when it's, cold and raining here in Vancouver, and then take more time off in the summer, despite Lisa saying otherwise.
I just got to tease you. I know we did. We have actually figured out some more balance. And I'm mostly bugging you. I am glad though that I got away to Europe, because that was the disconnect I needed. I feel like I need to be on another continent. Otherwise you still show up with deals and bank runs. All right, babe. Any last thoughts you want to share?
No, I don't think so.
Thank you so much for being here and doing this episode. Before we go, let's do a shameless plug here about our networking events. We just did one last week with Marinella Nicolosi, It's amazing, all about private lending. That's actually probably a good segue too, just to mention that there are ways to invest passively in real estate. Episode 71 of Golden Girls podcast is with Marinella Nicolosi, so go listen to that. Those are also joint ventures and REITs and other things. So we'll probably do a future episode diving in a little bit more on those things. But definitely go listen to episode 71. We also did have Marinella at one of our networking events, and it was fantastic. And we just find that like real estate, like you said, like a lot of the value that we've been able to create has come from our network. And so we wanted to bring people together and start connecting the great people that we know. So we've been hosting events both virtually and in person in Vancouver. If you're interested, I'll put the link to our Facebook group below and our email list so you can find out more about events. We don't spam at all. Like secret here, not so secret. I hate sending emails. I just don't do it. But we do send you an email, let you know that there's an invite, let you know that we're hosting an event, and that way we can stay in touch. And we have guest speakers. We do hot seats or friendly seats, if you will, breakout groups. And it's just an amazing way to get inspired and connect with other investors and create those partnerships to help you grow your business and portfolio. So we'd love for you to join in. Thanks for being here, Troy. I always get a barrage of comments afterwards saying how much people love having you here. And it's always fun for me, so thanks, babe.
You're welcome.
Don't worry, I'll have you back for many, many more.
I'm sure you will.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for being here. Feel free to share this episode. That helps us reach more people. If you've got a colleague, a friend, a fellow investor, a family member, neighbor who you think needs to hear this, we would love for you to share it with them. And if you've got a minute, make sure you go ahead and leave us a review as well so that we can reach more people. Thank you for being here. Hope you have a wonderful day. And I feel like I need to sign this off with the Britney Spears Work Bitch song because all we did was talk about work. Have fun.
Please don't do that.
Thank you so much for listening. If something spoke to you, send me a message by sharing this episode and tagging me on social media. If you know someone who would love to hear this episode, please share it with them too. Because I love surprises, make sure you subscribe to the Golden Girls podcast today. It's the only way to find out about bonus surprise episodes and make sure you don't miss a single beat on your golden journey. Thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you in the next episode of the Golden Girls podcast.